Okay, y'all. Hey, guys. This is Queen Renee coming in once again with a story time for you all. So, this is going to be, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a couple of parts. I'm hoping to keep it down to two parts. Um, but this one, because this one is going to be long. Um, this story time actually is going to tell the story of my marriage, how I met him, how um, what transpired, how we ended up married, all of that good stuff, and what ultimately um, caused the demise of our relationship. So, um, I hope you guys will watch both parts. Even if I have to make a part three, I'm hoping not to have to do that, but it's a possibility. So, let's go ahead and jump on into it. If you like, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to my channel. As I stated before, I am relatively new. I have only started posting video feeds last week. So, but we're gonna continue to move on, and this is a series. My story time series right now is really primarily focusing on the men that have been in my life, the abuses that I have suffered with these men, um, and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and get started. So I actually met my husband in 98. So 1998, I met my husband, my ex-husband. Um, we were, let's see, I had moved to Minnesota in 95, and I actually met his sister, who became a really good friend of mine, um, at the very first job that I had in Minnesota. So I met her, and we became fast friends. We became friends, and she, after being friends with her for a while, um, a couple few years, I had known her, and I actually ended up getting quote unquote saved. Um, at some point, I'll go into that, um, um, but it'll be in the future on some things that I probably want to talk about later on. Um, but anyway, I met her, and I ended up getting saved. Uh, I want to say around about 97. Yeah, I think around about 97. So, um, so that means I was in the church, and I actually went to, um, I was Pentecostal at the time. I went to, a Church of God in Christ. I was Kojic. Um, for those of you who know what Kojic is, some may not, but that's what I was. I was Kojic. I've been brought up in the church. So It was something that I was familiar with. Um, my mother had been um, Pentecostal for most of my life. So, anyways, when I met, when I got saved, my friend said, I want to introduce you um, to my brother. And I was like, okay. She was like, I think you and my brother would, hit it off. Because he's in the church, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and he's always, he needs a good woman or whatever, whatever. So I ended up meeting her brother. And he, at first, well, he seemed like a really nice guy or whatever. He was a nice guy. Um, like he treated me nice, and he treated my kids nice. At that point, I had two children, um, two boys. So he treated my children. He treated us nice. Um, he lived in St. Paul, and I actually, by the time I met him, I was living in Woodbury, which is a suburb of St. Paul. I actually did not have a car then. When I moved out there, I just had it set in my mind that I wanted to get out of the city, and move to I was gonna move to a suburb. So I ended up moving to Woodbury, which is actually like a upper class neighborhood, or used to be anyway. So I had moved out there, and when I met him, I was already living out there. But once we met, he started picking me up and stuff, and he would give me a ride from St. Paul to Woodbury and stuff. You know, a, a lot of the days, a lot of days. So, I think when I met him, for, I was working at for the city, for the state actually, for state of Minnesota. I was working at the foster care, um, in the foster care department, and when I started dating him, and I worked there for a little bit. I was doing I was doing like a kind of like an internship type of deal for them in the foster care. I was working as a receptionist. Um, so anyway, he seemed really nice and everything. So moving on. Now, mind you, I said, remember that I was in the church at the time. So anyone that knows um, Kojic, Church of God in Christ, Pentecostal churches, it's against the rules to have extramarital sex. Um, so I was trying to be celibate at the time. And when I had met him, at the time I had met him, I had actually been celibate for about a year and a half at that point. And I hadn't been with anyone. And so we started dating and going out, hanging out together and things like that. And I knew better than to allow him, to just come over my house and hang out late at, late after the kids going to bed and stuff like that. I knew better than to do that, but it ended up, you know, it ended up being that. So one particular evening, he's at my house, and one thing leads to another, and we end up sleeping together. So not too long after that, after we started seeing one another, I ended up pregnant with my daughter. Now I know if you guys have been following the story, um, it seems like every time I end up pregnant by somebody, I it's like early on in the relationship. It's it doesn't take me long, like, to get pregnant, and yeah, and that's where we are with that. So anyway, I end up pregnant by him, and I go when I go to the doctor, and when I find out I'm pregnant and I'm at the doctor's, and my doctor, who was really, over the years of seeing her, we had became kind of, friends or whatever, and it was more of a, she's trying to talk to me as a friend, and not always just as a doctor or whatever. But she was a really cool female. So anyway, when I find out I'm pregnant, I'm like devastated. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is not the time for this. Um, what am I gonna do? Type deal. And my doctor is saying, get rid of it. Um, she's like, look, you are finally on your feet. You're finally doing well. You're almost done with school, and you you're almost done with school. You you're doing good finally. I've watched you over the years that I've known you, and you know um been your doctor, and I've seen the growth that you've had. I've seen the struggles that you've gone through and everything, and at this point you're really doing good for yourself. You've moved out of the city, you live in the suburbs, you work for the state, you got a pretty good gig, you got a chance to get in there permanently. You got all these things working for you, and why would you mess it up with another baby? So I tell her, I'm like, look, I can't have an abortion. I can't get rid of it. And she's like, what do you mean you can't get rid of it? You can. And I'm like, no, I can't. Because I was like, what if, all these years I've wanted a girl from the first time I had gotten pregnant with my first kid. I always wanted a girl, and I've got two kids now, and I didn't get that girl. What if this is that one time God has given me a girl, has blessed me with a girl, and I take his blessings and I go kill it. And then he decides that he won't give me another one. He won't give me another chance to be the mother of a little girl. So I was like, so an abortion is really out of the question. That's not something that we do. So she was like, all right, I understand, da 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 da. So anyway, um, I go and I actually Now, this is the funny thing, is when I found out I was pregnant, the, um, I want to say a few days before I decided that I was going to go to the doctor, that I needed to go to the doctor. And I can't remember why I felt like I needed to go. But I really wasn't thinking I was pregnant, I don't think. But I had broken up with him. I had stopped seeing him. And at this time, because I had been messing with him and everything and doing stuff I knew I shouldn't be doing, I had stopped going to church. So I actually ended up, um, after I stopped messing with him, dating him, I started talking to a guy that worked with me at the state. He was actually the chef in the cafeteria. And he was a really good cook. Like, I mean, it was the state. They have really good food there or whatever. Not just cafeteria food, if you know what I'm if you know what I mean. So anyway, um I had I had started seeing this guy, and when I went to the doctor and I went for this checkup or whatever, and she told me I was pregnant, and I was like, "Oh my God." So I had told him that I was pregnant. And when I told him I was pregnant, I was like, "I'm pregnant by my ex or whatever." And he said the same exact thing that she said. He's like, "Why are you gonna, well, what are you gonna do?" He's like, you really should, think about having an abortion because you're doing really well right now. It's just with you and Just the Boys, and you got a pretty good job, you make pretty good money, and you live in, you got a nice place and everything, and things seem to be going pretty good for you at this time. You might want to think about how this baby is going to impact your life. And I was like, I'm just looking at him like, dude, all right, if that's how you feel about that, um, we may have to part ways because, yeah, that's not gonna fly. So, anyway, I ended up telling him. I called him up and I told him. Now, I had stopped seeing him, and I don't think that he really knew that I had stopped seeing him, that I had kind of broken it off with him. It was just kind of like I just kind of ghosted him pretty much. And so, and just stopped calling, stopped accepting phone calls, and stopped talking to him or whatever. So I called him up and I told him I needed to talk to him, that he needed to come over because I needed to talk to him. I had something I needed to tell him. And so he came over to the house, and we had a little conversation. And when we had the conversation, he says to me, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "What do you mean? What am I going to do?" He's like, "Well, what are you going to do? What do you want to do?" And I said, "So what are you I'm hearing what he's not saying. I'm a Libra. We're pretty good at that. So I'm hearing what he's not saying. And he's just like, "Well, what are you gonna do? Da 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 da." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And he's like, I want you to do whatever it is you want to do, uh, whatever, like this and that. And so I told him, I said, "So what? You want me to have an abortion? Is that what you're saying?" He's like, "I didn't say that. I'm just saying I want you to do whatever you feel is best for you, that you want to do." And I said once again, "So what? You want me to have an abortion?" And he never would really answer the question. He just was like, I want you to do what you want to do. So I was like, all right, so if you want me to do what I want to do, then we're having a baby. So he's like, okay, that's fine, whatever. Um, I just want you to be happy. I'm like, whatever. Now, mind you, I'm not really happy because I just found out I'm finna have another baby. Um, and not only am I about to have another baby, I this light is so harsh. Um, I'm about to have another baby, and I am not married to that baby's father. So, fast forward. I'm pregnant. Go through the pregnancy. I think, yeah, I had gone back to church. So I went back to church and I started back attending church again, and did my penance, repenting and all of that to God for my mess up. And but I had went back to church. So when I had my daughter, my mom came because, mind you, I lived in Minnesota and I didn't have any family there. It was just me and my two kids. I actually, when I got to Minnesota, when I moved to Minnesota, I actually came there on a bus. I'd never been there. Um, I didn't know anything about Minnesota really. I just got on a bus. I had $75 to my name and two babies on my hip. One, a 2-year old and a 4-year old, and in tow. So by this time, my mom came to help me with the baby, with the kids and stuff, so she could watch my kids while I had my daughter, and um, it was a scheduled C-section, which all my children were born cesarean. So it was a scheduled cesarean, and so my mama came and I let him know when I was gonna have the baby. Um, and for him, so he know. He came after the fact. See, that color is really looking good, but in this light on this camera right here, it is not. I am looking really, really pale. So it makes me want to keep putting on more makeup, but I won't do it because honestly, in the regular light, it looks just fine. So anyway, um, he's saying, oh well, I had the baby. When I had my daughter, he came to the hospital to see my daughter, and when he saw her, he looked at her and he was just like in love. So he was like, yeah, that's my baby, that's my daughter, da 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 da. So I'm thinking, everything is okay or whatever. But when it came time for him to sign the birth certificate, I called him up, told him he needed to come and sign the birth certificate. He informs me that he needs a blood test. He wants DNA. Now, at first, when he said that, I was like taken aback. I never had anyone ask me for a DNA test. Neither one of my son's fathers ever asked me for DNA tests. Um, because I'm really not like, I'm not one of them women that just really kind of sleeps um around with multiple men when I'm in a relationship. What the heck? When I'm in a relationship, this camera is backwards, y'all, so it kind of throws me off. But anyway, so when he said to me he wanted a DNA test, I felt some type of way. And I was like, at first, and then I was like, you know what? Whatever. If you need a DNA test, that's fine. You have a DNA test. Don't bother me at all, because I know who her daddy is, and I know who her mama is. So it don't really bother me. If that's what you want to do, come on, go right ahead and get it. So he's telling me, his father's telling him that he should, that there's no way that my daughter could be his, because all these years um he hasn't had a child since his daughter, his oldest daughter, um was born. Now, my stepdaughter, God rest her soul, she just passed away. We were just in Mississippi last week um, for her homegoing. Um, she was a very sweet lady, young lady, and she's actually. What's funny is she was my stepdaughter, yes, and I loved her like she was one of my own. She was only 8 years younger than me. My ex-husband is 16 years older than me, I believe. Yeah, he's like 16 years older than me. So, anywho, he's saying he wants this um he wants DNA, da 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 da. I'm like, okay, fine, you can have it. You want to spend your money to get a DNA? That's perfectly fine. And your reasoning is really stupid to me, because who cares that you didn't have any other kids since your daughter was born? Um, and he's like, well, my ex-wife is saying that there's no way that that baby could be mine, because me and her tried for years to get pregnant and she never got pregnant. And I'm saying to myself, I'm like, and actually, I think I said it to him too. I was like, that's neither here nor there. First of all, you old, she old. She was a crackhead. I'm none of that. I'm young. I think at the time I was what, 26, 27. Um, I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. None of that. So, and on top of that, I'm a breeder. Um, that's just, I just am. Um, when I'm not on birth control, I can get a baby. So anyway, I'm from a long line of breeders. Anywho, so, but I was like, anyway, if that's what you need to do, then you do you. You do what you need to do. So he he got his little DNA test, and when he got his DNA test, it came back and it said the test they sent to me, the paperwork that I got, said 99.99. He still to this day says it said 99.96, which don't make a difference. Either way it goes, she yours. So he found out that she was his. Now, once he found out that she was his, he his whole attitude changed towards um her. Like, um he was very, very active in her life. When I say he was a really, really good dad, he was a really, really good father. Um, we had an agreement. We never went to, like, he never signed her birth certificate or anything, um, because I just was over it and I didn't have no time for it. Um, but he actually was, we had an agreement that he would have her every other weekend. And so he came and he would pick her up every other weekend. And then at first, it was, I would send him with things and clothes, bottles, things like that. And I think after probably the second time or something like that, um, because I was breastfeeding, so I would have to send him with breast milk, but then we kind of had her acclimated to where she would do breast milk and then sometimes formula, because if he didn't have enough to make it, stuff like that. But after probably the second time that he had taken her, I had told him, this will be, you need to buy things, you need to purchase things at your house so that I don't have to pack her up like she's going for a sleepover at somebody's house. Um, I need you to have your own stuff at your house, bottles and clothes and hair things, all of that. I need you to have those things at your house for her. And he went and he did that. I never had to send her with anything. She just went with the clothes that was on her back, um, in her little carrier, which, I didn't mind sharing the car seats and stuff like that. But I would get her dressed and I would send her out of there with just the clothes on her back. No diapers, no nothing. And he had milk that he purchased, and I would send breast milk with. But that's how it became. Is she just would go there on the weekend with just herself. So this went on for a while. Um, she was born in November of '99. So November, well, come February of 2000, February of 2000, um, I moved into I lived at the time I lived in a 2-bedroom condo with just the boys. And then when she was born, it was just kind of like, we really needed to move or whatever. So we moved into a 3-bedroom up and down um, duplex. And so I had two bedrooms upstairs, 1 bedroom downstairs, plus like a living room downstairs and a bathroom downstairs and a bathroom upstairs. So it was pretty, it was a pretty nice size or whatever. He did help me move in there. Um, so we lived over there. We moved in there like February of 2000. And then around about, I want to say his father passed away in May of 2000, I believe. I might be a month or so off. April or May, something like that. His father passed away. So when his father passed away, I actually was there. Like when all of his family showed up for the funeral, and there we would be there like every day or whatever, um and stuff like that. So all of his family had met me and met my kids and everything. And so we actually ended up started talking again in May, um, in April. So I guess his dad have passed away in April. So we started talking again in like late April, and we decided to get married. Um, I don't. He never really asked me to marry him. It was just kind of like we came to an agreement, and we ended up. Like I said, this was like late April, early May. We ended up getting married June 26th, I believe. June 26th of 2000. Um, it was really a rushed, it was like a rushed thing. Because at the time, I, like I said earlier, I had gone back into the church, and I had told him that we were not gonna have sex before we got married. Um, so that was off the table. Um, and so everything was just rushed. I did have a meeting with my pastor and his wife at the time, and they actually had asked me if I was sure that this is what I wanted to do, because I didn't have to. Um, I, my, I'm sorry, my daughter was not born in November. My daughter was actually born in July of '99. She was conceived in November. Um, or I found out I was pregnant with her in November, something like that. But anyway, she was actually born July of '99. So, but I had went back to, and they had asked me if I was sure, and um, they kind of tried to talk me out of it. And I remember my pastor's wife saying to me, um, that just because I had a baby with him, and sometimes us women, um, of God, want to we try to fix things and compensate for things that we've done, that we feel that because we were out of the will of God, that we feel we have to compensate for that. And because we made a mistake, and during that process of making that mistake, we ended up pregnant. We would think that we had to marry these daddies, because we ended up pregnant. And she was like, just know, you don't have to marry him. God forgives you whether you marry him or not. And she asked me, I remember her asking me, well, Sister Regina, do you love him? Do you love him? And at that point, I had convinced myself that I did. Um, and I know that for a fact that I convinced myself that I loved him, because I sat there in that lady's face and I said, "Well, yeah, 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 I love him." Um, but I really didn't. So the problem is that at the time that I married him, I was upwards of 300. pounds. I had my third child by man number three and had never been married to any of them. And I felt that I if I didn't take the opportunity, that nobody was looking at me. Didn't have any other suitors at the time, and that if I did not go on and marry him, I'd be out here with baby number three on my hip without no husband, without no man. And I just kind of felt that was shameful, I guess. And so I convinced myself, yes, I love him. And we'll be good together. We'll be all right. He's a good man. He's a good guy. So I went on ahead and I married him. Now, once I married him, let me back up. Before we had decided to get married, his pastor and his pastor's wife wanted to have a meeting with us. And I remember specifically when he said that the pastor and his wife had wanted to have a meeting with us. And I said, a meeting about what? I don't go to y'all church. I don't got to meet with your pastor and his wife. For what? What they want to meet with me for? So he was like, could you just do it for me? Can you just come to the meeting or whatever? So I was like, sure, whatever. We go to this meeting, and I was just so dumbfounded with the way that meeting transpired. That meeting was awful. Um, I remember his pastor's wife asking us if we were gonna get married, and I told her flat out no, because I had no intentions of marrying that man. And I said no. And she said, okay, if you all are not gonna get married, are y'all still seeing each other? And I said no. That's over and done with. Because honestly, in my mind, that I really had thought that I was done with him and I would never date him again. Um, I guess I couldn't think stuff like that sometimes, and I'm wrong because I ended up back with him. So anyway, um, they the with his pastor, when we had the meeting with his pastor, and his pastor told him not to tell anybody about my child, um, because of the position that he held in the church, which was just absolutely baffling to me because I had never heard of nothing such blatant foolishness in all days of my life. So I was really upset about that, and I was upset with him because I thought I just was like, you gotta be kidding me. You're really about to sit here and let this man tell you that you can't tell nobody about your child? Okay. So I wasn't feeling that. And at that point, I was like, this is not some church. This is a church I will never want to belong to. So, anyway, fast forward. We end up getting married. We got married in 2000. Now, no sooner we got married. Now, I remember I told you guys that he was really a good guy. And he was. But he ended up not being the person that I thought I knew. He was a totally different man once I married him. Now, I'm going to stop this right here because this is going to be part 1. So, we're going to move on to part 2, and I'm going to continue that in just a minute. But I'm going to stop this video right here. So, like, share, and subscribe. Come back for part 2. And I'll try to get it finished. So, thank you guys for listening, and I'll be right back with part 2.